Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's the central plank of our economic plan that a tough and credible fiscal policy creates the space for an active monetary policy. And recovering from the financial crisis has exposed the shortcomings of conventional monetary tools. We in Britain have had to innovate and develop new tools. So have other countries. And I confirm today that the Asset Purchase Facility will remain in place for the coming year. We are now actively considering with the Bank of England whether there are potential extensions to the successful Funding for Lending scheme that will boost lending still further. And we're also setting out our plans for lending from our new business bank. But I want to make sure that an active monetary policy plays a full role in supporting the economy. So I am today setting out an updated remit for the Monetary Policy Committee. Alongside it, we're publishing a review of the monetary policy framework. This budget confirms the primacy of price stability and the inflation target in Britain's monetary policy framework. The updated remit reaffirms the inflation target as 2% as measured by the 12-month increase in the Consumer Prices Index. The target will apply at all times. But as we've seen over the last 5 years, low and stable inflation is a necessary but not sufficient condition for prosperity. The new remit explicitly tasks the MPC with setting out clearly the trade-offs it has made in deciding how long it will be before inflation returns to target. To ensure a fuller communication between the Bank and the Treasury, I am changing the timing of the open letter system so that when inflation is above target, the Governor will write to me on the day the minutes of the next MPC meeting are published to allow for a more substantive exchange of views. The new remit also recognises that the Monetary Policy Committee may need to use unconventional monetary instruments to support the economy while keeping inflation stable. And it makes clear that the committee may wish to issue explicit forward guidance, including using intermediate thresholds, in order to influence expectations on the future path of interest rates. For example, that is what the US Federal Reserve has now done, making a commitment to keep interest rates low while unemployment is high, provided inflation is not expected to rise too much. This can help the economy because it gives families planning their futures and businesses wondering whether to invest more confidence that interest rates will stay lower for longer. So I'm asking the Monetary Policy Committee to provide an assessment of how intermediate thresholds might work in Britain and to give that assessment in its August 2013 inflation report. That report will be the first issued under the governorship of Mark Carney. Whether intermediate thresholds are used will be an operational matter for the independent MPC, and I can confirm Mervyn King and Mark Carney have both seen the new remit and they have both agreed to it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, active monetary policy can only operate freely when securely anchored by credible fiscal policy. That is the next component of our economic plan. We have instituted new public spending controls in government. When money is short, we make no excuses for the rigorous financial management we have run across Whitehall. Let me be clear with the House. This is one of the reasons why we've got forecast borrowing falling in this year and next. The traditional splurge of cash by departments at the end of the financial year just to get the money spent has to be curtailed. And thanks to the tough financial control of my right honourable friend, the Chief Secretary, government departments are forecast to underspend their budgets by more than £11 billion this year. If you want to bring borrowing down, then you have to control spending, and this is what we have done. Now, we want to ensure departments have budgets that are more closely aligned to what they actually spend. So both next year and the year after, we will reduce resource departmental expenditure limits by the equivalent to a 1% reduction for most departments. The schools and the health budget will remain protected because our promise to our NHS is a promise we will keep. Local government and police allocations for 2013-14 have already been set out and will not be affected. We will also deliver in this coming year on this nation's long-standing commitment to the world's poorest to spend 0.7% of our national income on international development. And we should all take pride, as I do, in this historic achievement for our country. as previously, the DFID budget will be adjusted to ensure we don't spend more than 0.7%. Mr Deputy Speaker, departmental budgets have yet to be set for the year 2015-16, which starts before the end of this Parliament. This will be done in the spending round that will be set out on the 26th of June. I said last autumn that we would require around £10 billion of savings from that spending round. I confirm today that we will instead be seeking an £11.5 billion of current savings. We've got to go on making difficult decisions so that Britain can live within its means. And because we make those decisions, we can get our deficit down and focus on our nation's economic priorities. Total managed expenditure for 2015-16 will be set at £745 billion. How the savings will be achieved will be a matter for the spending round, but existing protections apply. We're also taking steps to help all departments achieve the savings required. Together, my right honourable friends, the Chief Secretary and the Minister for the Cabinet Office, have identified that a further £5 billion of efficiency and savings and cutting the cost of administration can be made. This will go a huge way towards delivering the spending round in a way that saves money but protects services. So too will action on pay. The government will extend the restraint on public sector pay for a further year by limiting increases to an average of up to 1% in 2015-16. This will apply to the civil service and workforces with pay review bodies. Local government and devolved administration budgets will be adjusted accordingly in the spending round. We will also seek substantial savings from what is called progression pay. These are the annual increases in the pay of some parts of the public sector. I think they're difficult to justify when others in the public sector and millions more in the private sector have seen pay frozen or even cut. I know that is tough, but it is fair. And in difficult times, with the inevitable trade-off between paying people more and saving jobs, we should put jobs first. Mr Deputy Speaker,
Mr Deputy Speaker.
Mr Deputy Speaker, today is also the 10th anniversary of the start of the Iraq War, and the awarding of a posthumous Victoria Cross to Lance Corporal James Ashworth this week reminds us of the courage and sacrifice that all who serve in our armed forces are still making to defend our country. So we will exempt our military from changes to progression pay. And we are also accepting in full from the 1st of May this year the Armed Forces Pay Review Body's recommended increase in the so-called X-Factor payment made to military personnel to recognise the particular sacrifices they make. And I can also announce that further awards from the LIBOR banking fines have gone to good military causes, with money for combat stress to help veterans with mental health issues and funds for Christmas boxes for all our troops on operations this year and next. Those who have paid fines in our financial sector because they demonstrated the very worst of values are paying to support those in our armed forces who demonstrate the very best of British value. Mr Deputy Speaker, ultimately as a country we will not be able to spend more on the services we all value, from our NHS to our armed forces, or invest in our infrastructure unless we go on tackling the growth of spending of welfare budgets. The public spending framework introduced by the previous government divided government spending into two halves: fixed departmental budgets and what's called annually managed expenditure. Except in practice it was annually unmanaged expenditure. And it includes almost the entire welfare budget, as well as items like debt interest and payments to the European Union. I can tell the House that according to the OBR forecast today, the European budget deal secured by my right honourable friend the Prime Minister has saved Britain a total of £3.5 billion. We will now introduce a new limit on a significant proportion of annually managed expenditure. It will be set out in a way that allows the automatic stabilisers to operate, but will bring real control to areas of public spending that have been out of control. We will set out how more detail on this works in how this new spending limit works at the spending round in June. All decisions on welfare, pay and departments are tough, and they affect many people. But if we didn't take them, then what is a difficult situation for them and for the whole country would be very much worse. Mr. Deputy Speaker, active monetary policy and a responsible fiscal policy are two components of our economic plan. We also need supply-side reform to throw the full weight of our efforts behind the entrepreneurial forces in our society. Our fundamental overhaul of the planning laws are now helping homes to be built and businesses to expand. Our reforms of schools, universities and apprenticeships is probably the single most important long-term economic policy we're pursuing. Our support for European free trade agreements with India, Japan and the US is a priority of our foreign policy, and we're building the most competitive tax system in the world. But now we need to do more. First, we can provide the economy with the infrastructure it needs. We're already supporting the largest programme of investment in our railways since Victorian times and spending more on new roads than in a generation. We're giving Britain the fastest broadband and mobile telephony in Europe. And the Treasury is now writing guarantees to major projects, from supporting the regeneration of the old Battersea Power Station site to building the new power stations of tomorrow. We've switched billions of pounds from current to capital spending since the spending review to mitigate the sharp decline set in train by the last government. But on existing plans, capital spending is still due to fall back in 2015-16, and I don't think, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is sensible. So by using our extra savings from government departments, we will boost our infrastructure plans by £3 billion a year from 2015-16. That's £15 billion of extra capital spending over the next decade, because by investing in the economic arteries of this country, we will get growth flowing to every part of it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, public investment will now be higher on average as a percentage of our national income under our plans than it was in the whole period of the last Labour government. In June, we will set out long-term spending plans for that long-term capital budget, and we'll use the expertise of Paul Deighton, the man who delivered the Olympics and who now serves in the Treasury, to improve the capacity of Whitehall to deliver big projects and make greater use of independent advice. The second thing we can do to support enterprise is to give our great regional cities and other local areas much greater control over their economic destiny and back sectors that are a global success. Businesses have created more jobs in areas like the West Midlands in the first 3 years of this government than they did in the first 10 years of the Labour government. Private sector employment has been growing more quickly in the North East, the North West and Yorkshire than across the whole country. But we can do much more. So I accept Michael Heseltine's excellent idea of a single competitive pot of funding for local enterprise. I also fully endorse the report of Doug Richard to make the most of our apprenticeships. We have the second largest aerospace industry in the world. For the first time in 40 years, we manufacture for export more cars than we import, and our agri-tech business is at the global cutting edge. We're backing international success stories like this with £1.6 billion of long-term funding for the industrial strategy that my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, launched this week. And today, we build on our new tax reliefs coming in this year for the creative industries like high-end television and animation, with new support for our world-class visual effects sector. To help small firms, we'll increase by fivefold the value of government procurement budgets spent through the Small Business Research Initiative. We will fund the proposal to make growth vouchers available to small firms seeking advice on how to expand. And we're putting new controls on what regulators can charge and giving the pensions regulator a new requirement to have a regard for the growth prospects of employers.